Another round of scandal with the Epstein files, and this topic is really starting to become less boring for Ukrainians. Why? Because more and more names are appearing there. For example, today it became known that there are quite specific things in the Epstein files that concern our president, Volodymyr Zelensky. What we are looking at here is a documented conversation between Jeffrey Epstein and the economist Larry Summers. And it actually traces its origins all the way back to the month of May in 2019. The discussion is specifically about providing comprehensive support for the nation of Ukraine, as we can clearly understand from this correspondence, Mickey, both in terms of economic aid and militarily. And Epstein, for example, says this. You can see it right here. President Zelensky is currently finding himself under a significant amount of intense pressure. He's an actor, right? I don't think he's another Reagan. Then Summers goes on to write, I am actually acquainted with those who sponsor him on a fairly personal level. Epstein. Does he even understand anything? He seems like a classic and opportunistic Eastern European figure who frequently capitalizes on the sensitive topic of Ukrainian dignity, despite the fact that he is a halachic Jew himself. Obviously, this is cheap comedy for the voters, but it's concerning when he starts playing this act in front of our investors. So that's the kind of context, Well, I understand it might be taken out of context, but it's actually interesting. And by the way, this isn't the only mention of Volodymyr Zelensky. There are other mentions as well. Specifically, there are 24 episodes in which Volodymyr Zelensky is mentioned in one way or another. Well, not Volodymyr Zelensky himself, but his surname appears. And that's exactly one time less than the number of mentions of Petro Oleksievich Poroshenko. In particular, this is reported by the Daily Mail, and our Ukrainian outlet Zerkalo Tizhnya is also analyzing this whole story. In the so-called Epstein files, Ukrainian politicians are mentioned dozens of times, but there they appear exclusively as subjects of political discussions or in news digests. What we just read, investments, Zelensky, actor, Reagan, comparisons, that's basically what it is. So this is one of those episodes that is mentioned specifically. If earlier 2 days ago, we received the figure that Zelensky is mentioned 24 times, now we see a specific episode and the context in which all this is mentioned. In the files, the current president is mentioned 24 times. Mostly these are news headlines and mentions in articles that were sent to FBI employees by email. But no, there is also direct speech from Epstein himself. As for Poroshenko, there are 25 mentions, and most often these are also references in news and publications. And there are also mentions of other Ukrainian politicians. In particular, Kuchma is mentioned 3 times in the context, by the way, of Gongadze, the Gongadze case, as well as mentions of Yulia Tymoshenko, Viktor Yanukovych, Yushchenko, and Vitaly Klitschko, and which is very serious. Derkach. Now, with Derkach, things are not so simple. That is, this is not just some contextual story. These are quite specific episodes that could prove. This is currently under review by the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which could prove Derkach's cooperation with the special services of the Russian Federation. Well, considering where Derkach is now, and as you know, Derkach is currently actually a senator in the Russian Federation, so he is a complete traitor, officially convicted in absentia, and no one will be able to get him out of the Russian Federation. So now it's clear that yes, it was all true. So in this context, he can be mentioned there as a Russian agent. The politician is mentioned in the context of spreading information about corruption in the USA, including the case involving Joe Biden, and is identified as a Russian agent. I'll read you more details now. The United States Department of Justice is releasing documents in which the city of Sumy and Derkach are mentioned. In particular, the politician is accused of interfering in the American elections. This is serious. This is reported on the website of the U.S. Department of Justice. What is known? In the new batch of documents released by the U.S. Department of Justice, the city of Sumy is mentioned about 10 times, including in several messages that refer to trips made personally from Kyiv to Sumy. An address in the regional center is also mentioned there. According to the data, a person born in 1991 is registered there. The emergency contact phone number listed is currently out of service. An address in the regional center is also mentioned there. Approximately 14 files mention Derkach, a former Ukrainian member of parliament who is now a member of the Russian Federation. References to him include quotes from American media. Mostly, he is mentioned in the context of interfering in US political processes and spreading information about corruption. For example, in one document, there is information from a Washington Post article where the deputy is accused of influencing the American elections. The assessment includes details from a CIA analysis of the activities of Ukrainian Deputy Derkach regarding the dissemination of disparaging information about Joseph Biden within the United States through lobbyists, Congress, the media, and contacts with individuals close to the president. The Treasury Department identified Derkach as a Russian agent, but it was not publicly reported that the CIA, NSA, or FBI believed that Putin might be personally directing this campaign. This is stated in the files. One of the excerpts also mentions that Derkach allegedly passed information to certain American lawmakers. And this already casts a shadow, in fact, on Ukraine. Because at the time when the American elections could have taken place, when Epstein was still alive, yes, this was a politician who was already most likely on the territory of the Russian Federation. Although it is not specified which year these episodes might be dated to, all of this has been declassified and still requires thorough study. Well, on the other hand, there's the Russian trace, the Russian agent. That's all well and good. And it all provides certain explanations as to how the Russian Federation might use this now, especially during the intensification of the negotiation process. Look, here's a story that the Ukrainian agency Ukrinform is writing about. Russian propaganda is spreading more than 300 fake publications, fake ones, mentioning Ukraine in the Epstein files. In just the period from January 30th to February 1st, the Russian Federation has significantly intensified information manipulation around the topic of Ukraine. And one of the most significant and controversial topics currently being discussed is specifically focused on the details surrounding the Epstein files and the complex nature of their alleged connection to Ukraine. What exactly is this about? According to analysts, one of the key tools of the information attack has been manipulation surrounding the materials published by the US Department of Justice, known as the Epstein files. In just one direction, more than 300 publications have been recorded in which any mention of Ukraine, Ukrainian politicians, or cities was used to promote narratives about an alleged coup d'etat, external governance, and total corruption. There really is one such document. This specific document originates directly from the private emails of Jeffrey Epstein. If you take a close look at the header, you can clearly see that it was sent back in March of 2014. The detailed information contained within these messages concerns various possible benefits, specifically highly profitable opportunities and strategic advantages that could potentially be gained from a coup d'etat occurring in the nation of Ukraine at that time. So to emphasize the timeline once again, this correspondence is dated March 18th, 2014, which is a very critical period in that region's history. You remember what was happening in February and March on Independence Square in Kyiv. The revolution of dignity was in full swing and at its most active, heated phase. And here, look, Ukraine upheaval should provide many opportunities. Many, once again highlighted in yellow. Of course, this is now being actively used as Russian manipulation in order to obviously create the image of Ukraine as a country that has failed, as a state that has not succeeded. What in American etymology is called a failed state. Well, in English, failed state. That's the purpose behind bringing all this up. So if you have access to these files and they are now publicly available, 3 million pages, please take a look. You'll find a lot of interesting things there. But it seems to me you need to approach everything with a clear mind. And it's obvious that there will be no consequences at all for Ukrainian politics from the fact that Poroshenko, Zelensky, Tymoshenko, and so on are mentioned there. There just won't be any. Well, you see, if people in Russia truly believe there will be something, well, there simply won't be. But the deep-seated agent influence of these Ukrainian traitors, like Derkach, for instance, now that is certainly quite a fascinating development to consider. And the influence on the elections is a story, well, without a statute of limitations. That is, this can be investigated forever.